There was a big fish out there, but the Chargers failed to make a big splash by trading for Micah Parsons, a move that could have launched them into contender status.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons. This is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcasts from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL was available via trade, and unfortunately, the Chargers missed out on capitalizing on that opportunity. So we got to talk about that and what that means. And also, the big ticket is ready to go. He's healthy and ready for week 1, ready to run people over, and I can't wait to watch it. And we get to talk about whether the Chargers have the best wide receiver room in the AFC West.
Well, they're off to a good start because they have the best wide receiver in the AFC West, a man named Ladd McConkey. But today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. David, Micah Parsons did end up getting moved, something that we talked about on the show potentially being something the Chargers should be entertaining and going after if they could. But I don't know if either of us actually thought he would get moved. And I think both of us probably would have expected it would have cost more than what it ended up costing. But when you see the power shift in the NFC like it did today with the Packers sending 2 first-round picks and defensive tackle Kenny Clark for Micah Parsons, and the price was steep, 4 years, $188 million, $37 million per year. He far clears everyone else. Or 47, yeah, thank you. $47 million per year, far over what the next highest non-quarterback is getting paid. I knew he'd be the highest paid defender in NFL history, but he cleared that bar pretty easily. But David, when you see the Packers going for it and kind of launching themselves into the talk of the best NFC team, it makes me, man, the Chargers feel like they missed an opportunity to get a huge kind of franchise-altering player here.
To me, I felt like it was just the very best person to be that heir apparent to Khalil Mack, right? It could be a guy who is about to step foot into Hall of Fame whenever he decides to hang it up, and have somebody who's on a Hall of Fame track take his place in the prime of his career. And I do feel like it was a missed opportunity there. We're talking about a guy who has 4 straight seasons of 12-plus sacks. That is major big-time production, and you could even argue that the best is yet to come. Like, he is in the prime of his life right now, 26 years old. The next 4 years, that's premium ability. And I mean, this guy is the absolute real deal. He is a game changer, a season kind of changer. And I feel like the Chargers missed out on an opportunity to vault themselves in a position to where they could be one of the more dangerous teams, not only in the AFC, but in the NFL, period.
Yeah, and I think it definitely would have put them in the contender conversation. Now, had they still had Rashawn Slater, now maybe it's you feel like, you know, you could actually have a trip to the Super Bowl, not just be in the conversations, but be one of, you know, the 3 favorites to make the Super Bowl out of the AFC. I think that's what it would have done. But the thing is, this isn't just a 1-year type of deal, right? This is something that changes and expedites the entire Jim Harbaugh era, right? This is something that speeds up the process as Jim Harbaugh tries to take this team from a perennial loser, a perennial choker, to what he envisioned it being, right? Which is a Super Bowl champion. The only reason to come back to the NFL outside of, you know, getting away from some NCAA sanctions. But either way, like, I think that this just would have expedited that process. And yes, it's a steep cost. I was surprised that it was Kenny Clark that was the player that was moved for it, but I think that kind of just begs the question, how much would you have given up? I mean, if you could find a comparable trade on the Chargers, I obviously would have given that up, but what does that look like for the Chargers? Let's hear.
Daniel, David, my boys, okay, we just saw what happened with this trade with Micah Parsons to the Packers. I know the Chargers should have made that trade. The question is, should have they gave up Thule in a first-round pick? or was it about the contract? Let me get your thought. Thank you. Please.
At least as far as the contract goes, I mean, the way I think about it is if you have a player that's that great, yeah, you kind of pay him whatever it's going to cost to keep him around, and I think the nice thing about the Chargers is also they have a GM that has shown he could find guys later on in the draft that can contribute for you, right? And you could build around it even if you don't have those first round picks, which I think is an important part of it. But I don't think it was the money that scared the Chargers away personally. But I'm guessing what you meant to say there is Thule in 2 first round picks, because that is what it would have cost, and I would have done that in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, hey, Thule is a good football player, right? He is. I feel like he does a great job of setting a physical edge, and he shows flashes of brilliance. But we're talking about someone who is brilliant all the time in Micah Parsons and has shown that repeatedly, consistently, and Thule, unfortunately, has not shown to be that level of player, or quite frankly close to it. So if we're just being honest, right? So
he's never been a double-digit sack guy. You're talking about a guy who's done it 4 years in a row.
4 years in a row, right? That's legitimate big-time production. And so, yeah, they're not similar players in that respect. So, yeah, absolutely, I would have made that trade. I mean, it's not even a second thought in my mind. It's a no-brainer. You pull the trigger immediately and you figure it out. Now, the Chargers really only had, depending on where you look, if it's Spotrac or, over the cap, between 15 and 18 million. So they would have had to have gotten creative with how they would have to get a little bit of extra space, or how they would have structured this contract to make it work. But if you have a chance at a generational player like you mentioned, I feel like you have to make any and every chance to be able to make it happen. But here we are. We're sitting talking about the Packers making one of the biggest moves of the offseason.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I mean, I think the thing is you would have to send somebody who's making some money is how it would have to work out, right? So you're probably talking about Khalil Mack potentially in a package of picks to get Micah Parsons. And as much as I love Khalil Mack, I mean, the Lakers loved Anthony Davis. It doesn't mean you don't trade for Luka.
Of course.
Right? And it just feels like it's like, man, you see a GM who's, I mean, what do you say about Jerry Jones, right? Obviously sticking to his guns, but you see a guy basically getting fleeced and you want to be on the end of that, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like if I knew that was the cost, if the Chargers, could have put something together like that. I mean, Jerry Jones did make a big deal about, stopping the run. Thule obviously helps with that. He's a great run defender, but it feels like they wanted a defensive tackle. The Chargers really wouldn't have had anything to give them close to Kenny Clark, but I mean, talking about a guy in his age 30 season and Kenny Clark, right?
9 years in the NFL.
You'd be trading some of that production, improving production, for a guy in Thule who's obviously young, going to cost less than, led the Chargers in sacks last season. But I think it leads to a great question that we have here from DroTalkSC on Twitter, who says, will we ever see Joe Ortiz make a move of this magnitude with the Chargers? David, what do you think?
I think, honestly, with this situation, the only thing that he has kind of been a part of, at least, or had a hand in, making a move of this kind of close to level, is when he was with the Ravens and they traded for Roquan Smith. And it's really still not quite at the same level. Yeah, he was the best middle linebacker, but we're talking about a pass rusher. It's just a little bit different level of the importance of that player in that position. So as far as would Joe Ortiz ever make that move, I don't think so. I just feel like the reason why is he's very, very conservative with the way he operates, how he utilized the cap space, the abundance of cap space this offseason. And I really feel like he covets his draft picks quite a lot, and you see why. He's really able to find great value up and down the draft, and he wants to build through the draft, and that's a way you can build a cost-controlled kind of roster. And so I just feel like that's not a move I feel like Joe Ortiz would make.
Well, I mean, I'd have to go back and figure out how long each GM has been in place, but there's a good chance you could say that 31 other GMs haven't made a move as big as this. This is the biggest NFL trade in a very long time when you're talking about a defensive player of the year at 26 years old getting traded. That is something that I know Joe Ortiz values his draft picks, right? His first round picks have looked good so far. Obviously, he's hit on a lot of picks, and he comes from kind of the scouting side of things where you want to keep those draft picks. But I just think that he has the ability to make something in the same orbit. Like the trade you're talking about with Roquan Smith is almost identical for what the Chargers traded for a 30-plus-year-old version of Khalil Mack. Not what Khalil Mack went for the first time when he went from the Raiders to the Bears, where this deal isn't even that, right? And Micah Parsons is younger than Khalil Mack was at that time. So this was we haven't seen one like this. I think it's about timing, and I do think that Joe Ortiz, when the time is right and they feel like the window is there, will make a big move. Maybe not of this magnitude, but at least in the same orbit. But we still have more to get into because we have great news along the offensive line. Mekhi Beckton spoke on Thursday, and he says he's good to go for week 1. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Hey, Locked On Chargers fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying gas that you were already going to buy. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. We've had Upside before. Real people getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for it. And a limited time 25% gallon bonus. That's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. I also need to tell you guys about Gametime because the NFL season is back. And honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and price jumping out at checkout, it's frustrating. No one wants to see that price go way up at checkout. They want to see the price that they're seeing with those seats be the price that they're paying. And that's one of the great things about Gametime. But the app that gives you the advantage, it gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by Gametime Guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price that you see is the price that you pay. I love all of the memories I have going to football games with my dad, and you should be getting your Chargers tickets with Gametime. But the one thing you want to do, especially if you're making a big trip, especially if you're traveling for it, you want to make sure everything goes right, and that's why I love the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. All right, David, well, we still have much more to get into because we did want to put some out for you guys, Fan Mail Friday, since everything's been kind of a blur recently. But we got some more good news today that we have to talk about, and that is Mekhi Beckton getting up at the podium and saying that he's good to go for week 1. This is something that has been all but speculation until you kind of hear it from the horse's mouth. So it was great to hear that, David, because, man, when you're talking about this offensive line, especially in a post-Rashawn Slater world, there's a lot of question marks here, and I think that's where this comes from Nicholas Petrilli, who says about this specific thing, talking about on a scale from 1 to 1,000, how concerned are you about the state of the offensive line and how it will impact our offense? Separately, on a scale of 1 to 1,000, how concerned are you over it, Mekhi Beckton's nagging knee ailment? So we did hear that he was back, which is obviously great news. We also heard that it was a nagging knee issue that was keeping him out for 3 weeks, which obviously doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, but it's hard to understate how much they need him on the field.
Yeah, they definitely do. I mean, he's he's the prize acquisition of the offseason, a guy that is coming off of a Super Bowl championship and played exceptionally well at the guard position after really struggling in the early part of his career at tackle. It's been made very clear by his play inside that it's just a better fit for him. It kind of limits the vulnerabilities in his game, with the quickness, and enhances the strength of his game, which is the strength of a 6'7", 363-pound monster. And you saw him just open up massive holes for Saquon Barkley, who had a almost historic rushing season. So this is a guy who's critically important, especially with the way that the offensive line is currently constructed. You want to have your best 5 available, and he's telling you that after dealing with some injuries that he said was not super serious, but was just something that he had to get under control, that he's ready to go. He said he was able to prove last year that he was able to stay healthy, and he feels confident that he's going to be able to do it again. And Daniel, they desperately need him to show that.
They absolutely do. And I mean, I think we all have our questions about the offensive line. If I was putting it out of 1,000, I'd probably say 685. is where my concern level is, just because I think it's the most likely
It's a great
flaw
answer.
on this team, that could tank their season, basically, right?
Yeah.
Talking about Mekhi Beckton, he's been healthy back-to-back seasons, pretty healthy, right? I'd say
Yeah.
it's at about 513 out of 1,000, probably a little over 50%, because I just know how important that he is to
Yeah.
this offensive line and how much that interior specifically needs him. Now, I think, totally speculation, that this was kind of a maintenance program the Chargers were doing to keep that knee as healthy as they possibly could going into the season, and putting him with Ben Herbert extra to try to make him harder to break so that he'd be able to last the entire season. I'd probably see a lot of rest days in Khalil Mack fashion in his future, but that's where that's what I hope was happening, and I think something that's very likely at least part of the case. But the Chargers did have some more news. Everyone's freaking out about, Micah Parsons. Nobody's talking about the Chargers re-signing Foster Sarell. I don't know if I still know how to pronounce this man's name after a few years with the Chargers, but some offensive line reinforcements. It's not something that moves the needle for me, David, but I think I could pretty confidently say that outside of the Chargers' top 7 offensive linemen, he's probably still a pretty decent upgrade over the rest of the guys that they had on that practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, those are the guys we saw in the preseason, and they were not very good.
Very low bar.
Extremely low bar, but I mean, this is a guy that did get with Duke Manyweather in the offseason, put together some great work, and obviously Duke has worked with Rashawn Slater, among many of the others, Charger offensive linemen, who's really an offensive line guru. So this is a guy who has some tackle and guard flex. I think he has played decent football, and so that's something that is definitely an upgrade over what the Chargers had before. And you just want to have somebody that can be able to keep things afloat a little bit while your starters are getting back to being healthy, because it's a physical, demanding position. And even going into the season, it's probably not anybody that's truly 100%. It's just a physical game of football. So you got to have reinforcements that you believe in. And obviously this is somebody that the Chargers are very familiar with. Not surprised. This is definitely a game and a business of football of relationships. And we see it manifest itself here with this move once again.
And I just think that the reality of this is just kind of sad that you could be excited about Foster Sarell getting signed to the practice squad just because of how kind of brutal it's been. But 3 pressures and 99 pass blocking snaps in the last preseason he was here with the Chargers, playing a lot more guard. Had 40 snaps with the Chargers last season. Obviously comes in with a little bit more knowledge of the offense than, an Austin Deckwist does, or maybe some of these other newer guys who have only been here a couple weeks. In the case of David Sharp, who was waived or released for Foster Sarell, but then signed later on. So another roster move coming up, at least for that practice squad with where the numbers are at. But let's get to this last one here from Rand Jiggity, who says, do you think Joe Ortiz has something up his sleeve for the O-line depth? And David, as sad as it is for me to say, and as much as I've been, the biggest advocate of it's not over till it's over with Joe Ortiz, this is the first time of the offseason where I'm saying, I think this is it. Like, I think this could be the line they're going into the season with.
Yeah, I do believe that it is, and I felt the same way. This is something you asked me before we kind of started recording as we were putting this show together, and for the first time in the offseason, I felt like the answer was no. I just feel like going into it right now, as this show is being put out on a Friday, the Chargers are 1 week away from going to play their first game of the season against the Kansas City Chiefs. The moves that they were going to make this week. This was the only week really to be able to make it happen. I just do not believe that they're going to make any other substantial moves to improve the offensive line. What you see now is who they're going to go to battle with to Brazil.
And let's be honest, right? Like, I'm not even upset necessarily that Joe Ortiz hasn't been able to get more done during this specific time. The part that's so upsetting is this isn't the time where you improve your offensive line. Maybe you can shore up some depth. They traded for Austin Deckwist, but if that is the biggest move you're making, it feels like a failure because you didn't put enough, didn't invest enough resources into this group earlier on in the offseason. Yes, you got Mekhi Beckton late, right, in free agency. I understand not wanting to pay, Will Freeze 15, 18, whatever $million a season, or pay one of those top guys what those guys got paid. A lot of overpays for sure. But there's a ton of gray area between that and not being able to bring in legitimate depth or legitimate competition for Zion Johnson at left guard, for Bradley Bozeman at center, right? Like there's just so much, and then you go into the draft and you wait until the 6th round before you take an offensive lineman. So the Chargers kind of showed you where their priorities are. I'm glad the Chargers have more weapons and all of those things. They're much improved in other areas, but they failed in the interior of the offensive line, and they're going to have to kind of own up to that if that's what ends up tanking the season, because you're one Mekhi Beckton injury away from really feeling like there's no depth and that you're much worse on the offensive line than you were last season, which is pretty sad to say, because the biggest competition for Bradley Bozeman was Zion Johnson, who was the only guy that even got a somewhat legitimate chance, didn't even give it to Andre James. And then who was the competition for Zion Johnson at left guard? Branson Taylor, Andre James playing there for the first time ever, Jamari Sawyer, who's already failed at that position for this team before. It's ridiculous that there wasn't more for those guys to at least have to earn those spots or, be pushed for those spots more than they were. So that's how I feel about it right now, but we still have more to get into because there is some good news. The skill position players did get better, and I do think the Chargers could have the best wide receiving core in the AFC West. So we're talking about that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. The preseason is over, and I know I'm ready for the real thing, and there's a huge slate of college football games this weekend to whet your appetite a little bit for the big ones coming up next week. So whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the game. They also have weekly flyers, and for this weekend, PrizePicks is offering major max discounts. For the opener next week, you can go with Dak Prescott, max discounted Thursday, September 4th. All you have to do, more than half a passing yard. They're basically giving you that one. But PrizePicks is simple. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. I've used PrizePicks for a few seasons now, and I love how simple it is. I can get a lineup in before my coffee finishes brewing, and I'm a last-minute guy there. And PrizePicks also puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get your $50 lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. Dave, we still have more to get into because we still have some great fan mail questions from everyone, and we appreciate you guys and wanted to let you guys get your input on today's show because that's one of the things that has made our show great. And thank you, as always, for making us your first listen. But we do have an important request as well. Lockdown wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to LockedOnPodcast.com/survey to get started. And everyone who completes a survey will be entered into a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's LockedOnPodcast.com/survey. David, let's get into the next of our fan mail questions that we have here, including a voicemail we have from John in Anaheim talking about a much maligned, maybe very underrated receiving core the Chargers have in Los Angeles right now. Let's hear what he has for us.
Hey, Daniel. Hey, David. This is John in Anaheim. I have a buy or sell for you. The Chargers, even though they may have one of the cheapest wide receiver rooms in the division, they have the best wide receiver room in the division. Buy or sell. Thank you.
Yeah, we did put out buy or sell post yesterday. We had so much news, we didn't get to it, but we still wanted to get to some of those great buy or sells that you guys sent in. David, I already tipped my hand a little bit here. Do you think the Chargers have the best wide receiving core in the AFC West?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think you look around the AFC West, there is not really a lot of top-end talent. I think with the Broncos, Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Jacoby Myers is an underrated player. I feel like he's pretty solid. Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, he's suspended for the first 6 games, so he's not going to be seeing any action. But when you consider like just the depth and the quality of the Chargers wide receiver room, I feel like they have the best. They have the best overall wide receiver, bar none, easily in Ladd McConkey, a guy who showed you that he can do everything. He can catch the quick passes. He can catch the contested catches. He can, get those yards after catch. He can do it all. He is a fantastic young receiver, and I can't wait to watch him explode. They have that veteran in Keenan Allen. They have a gadget wide receiver with Quentin Johnston, and they have 2 guys, and Trey Harris and KLS, who I feel like are underrated and are going to show themselves when they get their opportunities. They have a skill set that is going to benefit this Chargers offense.
Yeah, and rookies are the hardest ones to judge, right? And the Chargers could have or do have two of them that they could be relying on, production from. But I do think that it's like if Quentin Johnston is your wide receiver 3, that's not terrible, right? Now, you have rookie receivers that could even push him for that spot and make him your wide receiver 4 potentially, maybe wide receiver 5 if everything, went crazy for those guys. I mean, yeah, that's a pretty stacked wide receiving core. I think definitely having Keenan Allen and someone that you expect to have a good bounce back season and still had a decent season last year as your wide receiver 2 gets him over the hump with Ladd McConkey being that guy, because the only receiver in the AFC West that's put up a season like Ladd McConkey had last season, it was Amari Cooper in his prime, right?
Yeah.
And that is a guy who took until, this last week before he got signed in this free agency. So Amari Cooper and Jacoby Meyer, that's okay. Jacoby Meyer definitely underrated, dude. Cortland Sutton, maybe the second best receiver in the AFC West. Hollywood Brown hasn't had a 1,000-yard season since 2021. He's only had one season in 6 years that is over 800 yards. So
Yeah.
Xavier Worthy definitely heated up in the playoffs, but I'd say overall, the Chargers definitely at the end of the season will be saying this was the best wide receiving core in the AFC West for sure. But let's switch over to the defensive side here with Jeremy and Williams, who asks, what's happening, fellows? So with the DB room unsettled in terms of pecking order, is there a realistic shot that these young boys got a chance to get on the field? I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts. This is a good question. Obviously, we're talking about, at least Nikko Reed, Eric Rodgers for sure. And then maybe even, guys like Marlowe, even though he's bringing up the defensive backs. But I think it's those young guys, maybe Kendall Williamson you throw in there too. Dave, what do you think here as far as those guys getting a chance to, they made the roster, but actually getting on the field to show what they can do?
Yeah, I think there is a chance. And I think the guy that I'm looking at that could get replaced in that kind of lineup that's being considered as, being a starter is Benjamin St-Juste. I feel like that's the guy I feel like Nikko Reed can come and step in and take snaps from, and Eric Rodgers, who is of similar size and a guy who has showed to have some real ball skills, at least in the preseason with his 2 interceptions. Like, yeah, these are guys that are going to get opportunities. This is a very, very long season. So I feel like those are guys that, hey, they're here for a reason. I feel like they're definitely going to start out on special teams. They're going to give those veterans every opportunity to go out there and show what they are capable of and show that they are competent to do the job that they are being asked to do. But those young guys are going to be nipping at their heels, and they are here for a reason, not just to play special teams. It may start that way, but it might not finish that way.
Well, and I think, you only have to look back to last year where you had to play Eli Apple, right, off the streets.
This is true.
You had to play him. So to show you kind of how much that depth is important. And also, let's not forget that Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart probably went into the season last year as the 4th and 5th cornerbacks on this team.
Yeah.
And you can make an argument for 5th and 6th because it was Asante Samuel Jr., it was Christian Fulton who started off as the starters, and then you had Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard who obviously went in with a leg up, and then you had these 2 rookies that were drafted in the 5th round and weren't promised anything. Both of those guys got a ton of playing time, and yeah, the Chargers we know are using kind of a rotation, but even Tarheeb Still wasn't sure that he was a starter when at the podium on Thursday. So there is a rotation there, but it brings up a great kind of buy or sell here from Techie Luciano, who says buy or sell Nikko Reed and Marlowe Wax will combine to start at least 6 games in 2025. David, we said they'd play. Will they start 6 games combined?
That's a really, really tough one, man, because obviously we can never anticipate what the injuries are. There are going to be injuries. I said that. And what does it mean to really start? I think, they're going to get the most snaps in the football game over other players. Yeah, I feel like there's a possibility for that. There's a possibility for that. We saw it last year. Obviously, you just mentioned that. I just think that's a really high number for those guys. And if that is the case, then we're having some big problems because that means that your starting guys are not out there and not ready to go because we're talking about these guys being a little bit lower on the depth chart. They're going to get out there. I'm confident that they're going to play. I think I'm going to sell 6 games. I think that's just a pretty high number.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like it. I mean, you're talking about 2 guys combined, obviously, but in Marlowe Wax, you're talking about a best linebacker 4 if they have him ahead of Delshon Phillips. It's squarely behind Denzel Perryman, Junior Colson, Troy Dye, and Deion Henley, right? So those 3 guys for sure. Denzel Perryman's also never played a full season. So it's
this
like
is true.
You have to kind of pencil in some missed time there. Troy Dye comes in and takes over in his spot, you would think. But there's a chance Marlowe Wax could still get out there in that situation. But starting is a little bit different, obviously. And the thing is, though, you look back, Cam Hart started 6 games for you last season. Tariq Still started 12 games for the Chargers last season. The biggest difference is those guys weren't undrafted free agents, right?
Yeah.
That's a little bit different. The Chargers didn't, at least according to my research, have an undrafted free agent who started a single game for them last season that I could find. So not an easy thing to do. I think that, if you're looking for examples of that, you'd have to go back a few years. Like Stone Smart maybe started a game here. Michael Bandy started a couple games. What a time to be alive. But we do know it's a rotation. They will get some playing time. You'd have to think with just a season of attrition. But I do think that it would be hard for those guys to, start 6 games together, especially. This is the other thing you have to keep in mind, especially with Nikko Reed. Eric Rodgers is already working off to the side of practice, which is a good sign. Dean Leonard also on the short-term injured reserve. Both of those guys have to miss at least 4 games. But whose spots are they taking when they come back, right? Because I think Nikko Reed's ahead of Jasir Taylor, but we know how they feel about Jasir Taylor and his special teams value. If you have 2 cornerbacks you're expecting to return from injured reserve, because you are expecting both of them to return because you waited.
Something's got to give.
You put them on. Yeah. Whose spots are they taking, right? Will it be Nikko Reed's spot? Will it be Jasir Taylor? There's 2 guys that you're talking about. So that's another thing to keep in mind. We'll see kind of the health of the cornerback room once those decisions have to start being made. But having a deep cornerback room is never bad. And having a guy in Marlowe Wax that you feel like can go out there and hold down the fort for you if you have to, even if he's not making splash plays like he does in the preseason, looks like you have some there. Looks like the guy can play a little bit. So all good news for the Chargers, because as we saw last year, there were some guys that played last year, Marcus May being one of them, old Eddie Jackson being one of them, Eli Apple, that I would have never guessed in a million years to be playing for this team last year, and we saw those guys playing meaningful snaps. So you never know who's going to play, but it feels like the Chargers are better prepared for it this year than they were last. So that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen and checking out today's show. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you guys check out the new Locked On College show that's going on Amazon every Thursday with head coach of TCU, former Gary Patterson, on there. A bunch of great stuff going on. And the way that only a network that has so many local experts could be able to cover and talk about the matchups with 2 people that cover those teams every single day, only on Amazon Fire TV. That is really, really cool. I love that so far. But little scheduling note, we will not be back Monday because it is Labor Day. So we'll be back to you guys next Tuesday, ready to go full steam ahead because we have a big season coming up and we won't be, it's going to be all out every single day from then on out. So enjoy your weekend, enjoy your 3-day weekend. Be safe if you're going to be going out. And to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show on all of our social media every day at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page, like where everyone hit us up today, or the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. Might even be doing a buy or sell next week where we get into projections of players and who is going to do what in 2025. So I'm excited about that. Maybe we'll start with that next week. Will Justin Herbert throw for 4,000 passing yards? Give us your buy or sells for that. And make sure you guys are back here with us on Monday. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.